How's everyone doing? Good. I'm so excited to be here with you all. And again, I'm Kaya Thomas. I'm currently an iOS developer at Calm. I was formerly at Slack, where I worked on messaging and notifications. And I'm the creator of We Read Too, which is a mobile directory of children and young adult books written by authors of color, featuring main characters of color. And that's my side project, which is what we're going to be chatting about today. So raise your hand if you have a side project that you're currently working on. Okay, a good amount of people. Raise your hand if you have a side project that you've wanted to work on, but you've never really got the ball rolling. Okay, a good amount of people. I think that's all of us. We all have the ideas in our heads. So a side project can really be anything. I think as developers, we tend to do side projects that are more technically oriented, but if you have hobbies outside of tech, that also qualifies as a side project. So I think the number one thing that's important is finding a project that's meaningful to you. So if you have a skill, like exact PHP, if you have a skill and you want to teach that skill to other people, starting a blog might be a good idea, or a YouTube channel. If there's some type of problem that you see in your community or that you face yourself, that can be an opportunity for a side project. And that's how We Read Too, the app I created, came to life. Growing up, I was always an avid reader, but as I got older, I started understanding the lack of representation in literature. And so I created the app as a way to help solve that problem. And so if there are problems that you experience that you think could be a good technology tool can help with that, you might want to do a side project on it. And lastly, hobbies. I think we all have fun hobbies sometimes, but maybe you want to take it to the next level and start taking your hobby a bit more seriously and doing a dedicated side project to do that. So once you actually have your idea for your side project, I think the hardest part is starting. Number one, you got to think about what skills do you need to do. So if you are learning a new programming language for this, or you're learning a new stack, a new platform, a new tool, right? That's something that you have to account for in actually starting the project. You probably have to do some learning or research before you do that. Is it gonna cost you? So when I started out in iOS development, I used a lot of free resources to learn, but to actually launch an app, I had to pay $99 for the Apple developer program. So thinking about things like that are going to be important because you don't wanna have any cost barriers to starting out your side project. Time. There's never enough time. And I think that's the number one reason why oftentimes you don't actually get started. So think about how much time you have realistically outside of your job to work on this. Because the main point of this talk is doing this side project without quitting your full-time job. So this is not about, quitting your job and doing a startup, but it's about being able to balance and maintain working on a side project while you're working full-time. And lastly, what MVP would you feel comfortable with launching to the world? As developers, this is a really tough one. Oftentimes, we focus on perfection, and a lot of us have side projects that we started, but we never actually launched because it wasn't good enough or it wasn't ready enough. And so I'll be talking a bit about some techniques to how to get over that hurdle. In thinking about how you're actually gonna hold yourself accountable for doing this side project, I think it's good to ask yourself, do you respond well to inner or outer expectations? Inner expectations are goals or deadlines set by yourself. So if you're someone who's really intrinsically motivated, you can say, I wanna launch this side project in 5 months. And you might be able to easily hold yourself accountable to that. But others respond better to outer expectations. So if you respond better to outer expectations, that might mean you want somebody to help you out with holding you accountable. So you might want to have an accountability buddy or go on Twitter and tell people, hey, I'm starting the side project. Can you check in with me every week to make sure that I'm working on it? And that way you have that outer expectation to keep you motivated and keep you accountable for actually working on it throughout the time you want to work on it. I highly recommend checking out The 4 Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. She goes into detail about working styles and how to understand better if you respond well to these type of expectations. Planning. How many of you actually like planning? I'm a planner. I like planning. Okay, a couple of people raised their hand. But it's okay. If you don't like planning, it's completely understandable. But you'll have to do some type of planning if you actually want to realistically work on this project long term and launch it out to the world. I think this one is a really good exercise to do. Write down literally everything that you hope to accomplish with this project. Because realistically, you won't be able to do all those things, but it'll help you understand kind of what you want to do. So for me, when I was first starting to work on We Read 2, there was so many things I wanted to do with it. Diversity and representation in literature is a huge problem, and there's no way one app is obviously going to solve that. So I had to think about, what are all these things I want to accomplish, but what are the top 2 or 3 things that I can actually do? And I think that's what is key to actually realistically being able to work on a side project and get it launched. You only can do a few things at a time. Realistically, you can't do everything. So thinking about the most important 2 or 3 things that you can do, and then split those into goals. If you don't like planning, this may sound a bit overwhelming, but luckily there's a bunch of tools that can help you do this. So whether it's Trello, Asana, now I didn't put Jira on here because a lot of us use Jira for work, so you might not want to use it for a personal project. But if you love it, that's another tool you can use. But this will basically help you hold yourself accountable to smaller goals rather than saying one big thing. If you want to start a blog, that can seem overwhelming. What kind of blog are you going to start? What type of posts do you want to do? What's the cadence of posts that you want to make? So split it down into mini goals that are actually accomplishable. And that way you'll be able to more easily hold yourself accountable to doing it. Time management, our best friend. You have to limit the time that you work on it. I think a lot of us, especially as developers, sometimes we can end up doing something way more than we should. We get burnt out. You might get really excited about some new technology, and you decide that you want to have a side project where you launch a new website or backend with this new technology. But does that mean you should spend all night working on it and not getting sleep? No, you have to take care of yourself. And it's very important to limit the amount of time that you work on your side project. So think about how much time you realistically have, whether it's 1 hour a week or 1 hour a day. You think, okay, I'm only gonna work on it during this time, and pick a goal or one of those mini goals that you already worked out and focus on that for that time slot that you're working. It'll make it much more achievable, and it might take more time to get it done, but in the end, you'll thank yourself because you won't burn out. I think it can be really easy to burn out on a side project and then never launch it because you're so overwhelmed, you spent so much time, and you get sick of it. And the point of a side project is to enjoy it. It's to have fun, to do something that motivates you or something that you love. It's not to burn yourself out and then get disappointed because you never actually got to have your side project reach any real people. And I think thinking about the impact that your side project can have is really important. If you're launching something where people can learn from you, learn some skills, then you might impact new coders and developers who want to learn that skill. And you don't know how many people you can impact with your side project unless you actually launch it. So thinking about time management and time boxing is going to be really important to making sure that you can get it out to the world. Speaking of getting it out to the world, it will never be perfect. I think this is a mantra as developers we should repeat to ourselves very often because it can be really easy to get caught up in wanting to have something be the best or be perfect, especially if you're going to open source something, right? That's really scary. You might want to open source your project, but you're worried about the architecture or how it looks or how other developers are going to think about it. Or you might write a blog post and not launch it because you're wondering, what are people going to think? Am I saying the right thing or the wrong thing? And it could get really easy to get caught up in a lot of these negative thoughts. So it's important to remind yourself it will never be perfect and you need to just get it out there. That's the number one thing. Once you finish those 2 or 3 things that you outlined in your goals, just do it. Just launch it. Even if it's small and simple. When I first launched Reread 2, it was a simple list view. That's really all it was. It was a list view that had the title and author of the books that had diverse representation for children and young adults. That may sound super simple, but it had a big impact when it launched. And now in the 5 years I've been working on it, it has a much richer user experience. And there's a lot more features I've been able to add to it. But if I never took the leap to actually just launch that really simple MVP, I may not have ever gotten there to that point. And all of the people that that Riri 2 has impacted, like librarians and parents, educators, authors, that may have never happened if I was getting so caught up in perfection and thinking that I needed to have such a full-featured, rich application in order to get the first version out there. Asking for help. This is something I really struggle with. But after you accomplish those first goals that you set, you may need some people to help you out with the other goals. For example, I'm an iOS developer. I do not do Android. But after a couple of years for Riri 2 being out, people kept asking, when's the Android version coming out? When's the Android version coming out? And I, at the time, wasn't interested in learning Android development, getting started, and then having to create that whole application myself and get it out there. So I needed to ask for help. So in 2017, I did a crowdfunding campaign, which was super scary. I think anyone who's done crowdfunding knows how scary it can be. Asking people for money, it's really intimidating. But when I actually launched a crowdfunding campaign, I realized how much people in the community were actually willing to help and give back because of the impact that Riri 2 has had. So through that crowdfunding campaign, I was able to raise $15,000. And with that $15,000, I was able to hire an Android developer, hire a designer to make the UX better in the app, because I'm not a designer, I'm a developer. And I was able to get a website out and just get way more things so that the resource can go even further and impact even more people in the community. But if I was too afraid to ask for that help, then I wouldn't have been able to continue to accomplish those further goals that I set. So I think being realistic about what you can do as one person is important. And you might want to think about open sourcing your project. If it's a technology project, open sourcing is a great way for you to get help from others and feedback so that you don't have to work on your own. Or if you have a blog, ask your friends to read the blog post before you post it, or do a call out to Twitter to see if you can get some feedback before you post on your blog. There are so many different ways to ask for help in our communities, and me not being a part of the Laravel community, I can already see though how much that you guys care about this community. And so if you're doing something with PHP in this community, ask each other for help. And I think people will be so willing to help you out and help you get started and get launched out in your project. So the name of this talk, right, is Launch Your Side Project Without Quitting Your Full-Time Job. So you have to think about whatever your project is this something that you really would want to do full-time, or if it's something that you want to keep on the side? Personally, for me, I knew Riri 2 was a passion project of mine that I had no plans to monetize. It's a free resource, and I always wanted it to be a free resource. But for some folks, your side project may be something that you want to monetize and make some money off of, and that's fine. But you can also do that still on the side without making it a full-time job. So you have to really think about whether you want to take that leap or not. But if you don't want to take that leap, that's completely fine. You don't have to feel pressured to do your side project full time. I get this question all the time. People ask me, are you going to turn Riri 2 into a business? Or are you going to, do a nonprofit, or are you going to do it full time? And personally, for me, I actually like working. I like working and working on cool projects that reach millions of people. I had a great time when I spent a couple years at Slack, and now I'm at Calm, and I really enjoy working on projects with large teams. And unfortunately, I can't do that with Riri 2 on my own, and I don't want to, and that's okay. So think about what's right for you, and don't let anyone pressure you into making a side project, no matter how big or popular it gets, your full-time job. This one is super important. There's been times where I have not worked on Riri 2 for months because I just haven't had the mental space or capacity to do so. And that's also okay. So you have to give yourself the ability to take breaks from your side project. Because if you do not take breaks from your side project, you will burn out and you will sometimes resent it. And that is really a bad feeling, right? Something that you started that you were supposed to enjoy and it was supposed to be fun, and then all of a sudden you are feeling like it's a job. right? A side project is not a job. And if you're working full-time, you already have a job. You're already having your performance measured by what you're doing. You already feel the pressure of that work. So don't put that type of pressure on yourself for your side project. So make sure that you take breaks when you need to, whether that's a week, whether that's a couple of days, whether it's a couple of months. That's completely fine, but you have to take breaks. And this one is really tough too. A lot of us may have side projects that we worked on for years, right? You might have open sourced something and you might really care about it, but you haven't worked on it in a while, or you don't have the space, or maybe you're not as passionate about it anymore. And it's okay to end it. It's okay to deprecate it. It's okay to close it. Sometimes this can be really hard, especially if you have the history with something, but it's also important to make sure that you ask yourself, am I still getting fulfillment from this, right? Has it served its purpose? Have I accomplished the goals already with this project that I've wanted to accomplish? Do I still feel joy from this project? Is it taking more time or money than I can manage? When you ask yourself these things, and if you feel like, okay, I can continue this, I'm still getting fulfillment, there are still tons of more goals that I want to accomplish, then keep working on it. But otherwise, give yourself the space to end it. And if you have other folks who are working on it with you, be honest with them. See if there's someone who's willing to take it over from you, right? If you have an open source project, if there's someone who's been a really active contributor, maybe they're interested in maintaining the project, right? But make sure that you do not keep working on something just for the sake of keep working on it. Like, you need to give yourself the opportunity to move on. Maybe you want to actually start a new side project, but this old side project is holding you back. So these are things to definitely think about and make sure that you're doing the full due diligence to yourself so that you can give yourself the opportunity to continue to find joy from the things that you do outside of work. Like, personally, I've been working on Ruby 2 for 5 years, and it still gives me the joy and fulfillment. And there's still a lot I want to accomplish with it. And I want to work on it for as long as I can. But if it gets to a point where I can't work on it, I'll make that clear, and maybe someone can take it over from me. And that's a great opportunity as well for new developers in the community. If you have a project that's been going on long, maybe there's someone newer in the community who's still learning and wants to take on a project like that and can take over it for you so that it can continue on and it can still continue to have an impact. So I hope now that you have some concrete tips about planning, time management, thinking about how to actually launch your MVP for your side projects. And if you actually launch your side project or use any of the tips, I would love to hear from you. You can reach me on Twitter or my website. And thank you again so much, Laracon, for having me.